For 3 years, Korea's coldest billionaire, Cha Ji-hwan, fired every chef who cooked for him. 43 chefs lost their jobs. Some came from five-star hotels. Others had cooked for presidents, celebrities, and royalty. None of them survived a single month inside Cha Ji-hwan's mansion. People said his standards were impossible. Others whispered that he simply enjoyed humiliating chefs. But the truth was, he wasn't searching for the perfect meal. He was searching for something no one had ever been able to recreate. Then one rainy evening, just 30 minutes before dinner, the mansion's head chef ripped off his apron, slammed it onto the counter, and walked out. "I'm done." Silence fell over the kitchen. No one moved. Dinner had to be served in exactly 30 minutes, and everyone knew what happened to the person who disappointed Cha Ji-hwan. Then, from the very back of the kitchen, a calm voice broke the silence. "I can cook." The kitchen erupted in laughter. Every head turned toward the newest kitchen assistant, a young woman who had spent the entire day washing vegetables, scrubbing pots, and quietly staying out of everyone's way. One cook scoffed, "You?" Another laughed, "Do you even know who's waiting in that dining room?" She tightened her apron, glanced toward the dining room, and smiled. "I don't know much about billionaires, but I do know that nobody deserves to eat a bad meal." The laughter slowly faded, not because anyone believed she could do it, but because she spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime proving people wrong. None of them knew that before the night was over, the billionaire who had fired 43 chefs would finish every last bite, set down his spoon, look at his butler, and ask 4 words that would change everything. Who cooked this meal? The next morning, headlines across Seoul celebrated another record-breaking quarter for Cha Group. Business channels praised Chairman Cha Ji-hwan as the youngest billionaire to expand his family's empire into over 30 countries. Analysts admired him. Investors respected him. Competitors feared him. But inside his mansion, no one cared about the stock market. Every employee wanted the answer to one question. Who was the young woman Chairman Cha had asked for after dinner? The mansion had hired dozens of famous chefs over the years. Some came from Michelin star restaurants. Others had cooked for presidents and royalty. Every one of them had eventually walked out carrying a cardboard box. No one survived Chairman Cha's impossible standards. Yet somehow, the newest kitchen assistant had succeeded on her very first night. She had gone to bed expecting to lose her job. Instead, she woke up as Chairman Cha's personal chef. The staff still couldn't believe it. Neither could Simone Ellis. Lying awake in her small staff room, she stared at the ceiling. She had only come to Korea to save enough money to open the neighborhood restaurant she'd always dreamed of back in Chicago, a place inspired by her grandmother's recipes where strangers could feel like family. Becoming personal chef to one of Korea's most feared billionaires had never been part of the plan. Long before sunrise, Simone was already in the kitchen. She tied her apron, rolled up her sleeves, and began preparing breakfast. The mansion was silent except for the rhythmic sound of her knife. She smiled. Cooking had never been about recipes. It was about memories. Every slice of onion reminded her of afternoons beside her grandmother. She could still hear her saying, "People forget what you say. They forget what you wear, but they'll always remember how your food made them feel." Those words had never left her. The kitchen door opened. The staff immediately straightened. Mrs. Han entered carrying her clipboard. "Chairman Cha eats breakfast at exactly 6:30. Simone nodded. "Then it'll be ready at 6:25. Mrs. Han blinked. "You seem very relaxed." Simone smiled without looking up. "I'm only cooking breakfast." Several cooks exchanged worried looks. One whispered, "She really has no idea." Another replied, "Let's see if she's still smiling after this morning." Exactly. At 6:28, the butler carried breakfast upstairs. The kitchen fell completely silent. Everyone waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Normally, the tray returned almost untouched. Today, nothing. Finally, footsteps echoed through the hallway. The butler returned. Every eye followed him. He looked directly at Simone. "Chairman Cha requests coffee." The room froze. "Coffee? No complaints?" The butler hesitated. "And," he said, "the eggs were cooked perfectly." Gasps filled the kitchen. Mrs. Han looked just as shocked. In 3 years? No one remembered Chairman Cha complimenting a meal. Simone calmly poured fresh coffee. "I'll make it fresh." She handed it to the butler. "Tell him not to let it sit too long." Every employee stared. One whispered, "She just gave Chairman Cha instructions." Mrs. Han sighed. "This girl is unbelievable." At noon, another message arrived. Chairman Cha wanted lunch, prepared only by Simone. The kitchen staff quietly watched her work. Unlike the former chefs, she didn't cook to impress. She cooked with purpose. Every ingredient belonged. Every flavor mattered. Mrs. Han finally asked, "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Simone smiled. "My grandmother." "Was she a chef?" "No." "What did she do?" "She made people feel at home." Mrs. Han fell silent. Lunch returned exactly like breakfast. An empty tray. Not a grain of rice remained. Soon the entire mansion was talking. The gardeners, the drivers, even the security guards. Chairman Cha had finished 2 meals in one day. That evening, Simone finally met him. The dining room was enormous. A table built for 20. Only one chair occupied. Cha Ji-hwan sat reading business documents while dinner was served. He never looked up, never greeted her. He simply picked up his spoon, tasted the soup, and continued eating. Halfway through the meal, he finally spoke. "The soup." Simone waited. "It needs less salt." Every servant lowered their eyes. "Here it comes." "Instead?" Simone answered calmly. "No, it doesn't." Silence. Ji-hwan slowly looked up. "What?" "You heard me." She folded her arms. "It doesn't need less salt." One server nearly dropped a plate. Mrs. Han looked ready to faint. Nobody contradicted Chairman Cha. Ever. He studied her. "You disagree with me?" "I do." "Why?" "Because I tasted it before serving it." Silence. Then Simone added, "If I change the seasoning every time someone has a different opinion, the recipe stops belonging to the cook." Ji-hwan looked back at the bowl. He took another spoonful, then another. Finally, he finished every last drop. He placed the spoon down. Without looking at anyone, he said, "Keep the recipe." Every servant froze. Simone smiled. "I was planning to." For the first time, the corner of Cha Ji-hwan's mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but enough for Mrs. Han to wonder if she'd imagined it. As Simone walked back toward the kitchen, every employee watched in disbelief. She hadn't won Chairman Cha over because she was the greatest chef. She had won because she was the first person brave enough to treat him like an ordinary man. And somewhere deep inside the billionaire who had spent years surrounded by people too afraid to disagree with him, that was exactly what had been missing. The next morning, the mansion woke to something it hadn't experienced in years. Excitement. Instead of whispering, employees gathered in small groups talking about only one person, Simone Ellis, the young woman who had disagreed with Chairman Cha, and somehow kept her job. Even the security guards outside had heard the story. One laughed. "I still don't believe it." The older guard nodded. "I've worked here 6 years. I've seen chefs cry. I've seen one faint. But I've never seen anyone tell Chairman Cha he was wrong." Inside the kitchen, Simone tied her apron exactly as she had the day before. Nothing about her had changed. She wasn't celebrating. Yesterday had simply been another day of cooking. Mrs. Han watched her knead dough. "You slept well?" Simone smiled. "Like a baby." Mrs. Han shook her head. "I don't understand you." "Why? Most people can't even breathe properly around Chairman Cha." Simone shrugged. "He's just a man." Several cooks stopped working. Mrs. Han stared at her. "Don't ever let him hear you say that." Simone laughed softly. "I think he'd agree." Exactly at 7 o'clock, Ji-hwan entered the kitchen. The room fell silent. Every employee bowed. "Good morning, Chairman." Only Simone didn't. She was stirring soup. Without turning around, she simply said, "Morning." Mrs. Han closed her eyes. One young cook whispered, "She's finished." Ji-hwan watched her. After a moment, he asked, "What are you making?" She tasted the broth. "Breakfast. I can see that." She smiled. "Then we're off to a good start." Several employees nearly panicked. Instead, Ji-hwan simply walked away. The second he disappeared, the kitchen erupted. "What are you doing? You didn't even bow." Simone blinked. "My hands were busy," Mrs. Han sighed. "One day you're going to give all of us heart attacks." Days became weeks. The mansion slowly changed. Employees laughed again. The kitchen grew louder. Music occasionally played while Simone cooked. Even those who complained at first eventually hummed along. One afternoon, Ji-hwan paused outside the kitchen after hearing genuine laughter. He quietly continued walking, but without realizing it. The corners of his mouth softened. Ji-hwan still criticized almost everything. The steak is over-rested. The vegetables are too thick. The coffee is hotter than usual. Unlike the other chefs, Simone always answered honestly. One evening, he looked at his dinner. "This rice is softer than yesterday." "It is. I preferred yesterday's." "I know." He looked up. "Then why change it?" "Because today's menu needed softer rice." "You made that decision." "I did." "You didn't ask me." "I didn't need to." Mrs. Han watched from the doorway. She'd noticed the pattern. Chairman Cha challenged Simone. Simone challenged him back. Yet somehow, he always finished every bite. One rainy afternoon, Simone reorganized the spice shelf alphabetically. Later that evening, Ji-hwan opened the cabinet, paused, closed it, opened it again. Who touched this? Every employee froze. Simone raised her hand. "I did." "Why?" "Because it made no sense. It made sense yesterday." "Only if you enjoy searching for paprika for 5 minutes." Mrs. Han nearly covered her face. Ji-hwan reached for the pepper, then the garlic powder. Everything was exactly where it should be. He quietly closed the cabinet. "Leave it." The kitchen staff exchanged stunned looks. He hadn't argued. Late one night, Simone couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs for water. The kitchen light was on. Inside stood Chairman Cha, holding yesterday's leftover stew. Both froze. Finally, Simone smiled. "So, the world's busiest billionaire sneaks into the kitchen for leftovers?" Ji-hwan remained expressionless. "I wasn't hungry." She raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you holding a spoon?" He glanced down. "I was checking the seasoning." She burst into laughter. "You reheated an entire pot to check the seasoning?" For the first time, Ji-hwan looked almost embarrassed. "I couldn't sleep." "There. That sounds much more believable." She picked up another spoon and tasted it beside him. He looked at her. "What?" "It actually tastes better today." "Why?" "The flavors had time to settle." He nodded thoughtfully. Without realizing it, they spent 10 minutes discussing stew like old friends. After that, Chairman Cha often wandered into the kitchen after dinner. Sometimes he asked a question. Sometimes none at all. He simply watched Simone prepare tomorrow's meals before quietly leaving. No one understood why. Not even Ji-hwan. One afternoon, Mrs. Han found Simone sitting outside during her break. "You've changed this house." Simone looked confused. "I've only been here a few weeks." Mrs. Han smiled. "No. You reminded everyone that this is a home." Simone looked through the windows. Employees were laughing. Someone was teaching another cook a recipe. Even a security guard had wandered in, hoping for a snack. The mansion felt alive. She smiled. "My grandmother used to say, 'A kitchen tells you everything about the people living in the house.'" Mrs. Han looked toward Ji-hwan's office. "And what does this one say?" Simone answered quietly. "It says someone has been lonely for a very long time." Neither woman noticed. Ji-hwan had heard every word from the upstairs balcony. For the first time in years, someone had seen beyond his money, beyond his reputation, and seen the lonely man underneath. He quietly returned to his office. But that night, for reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself looking forward to breakfast. By the beginning of the second month, something impossible had happened. Chairman Cha Ji-hwan had stopped firing people. The mansion staff noticed first, then the board of directors. Even the media reported that Korea's coldest billionaire seemed different. He smiled during meetings. He no longer skipped lunch. The newspapers called it a new leadership style. The staff knew the truth. Simone Ellis. She had made the mansion feel alive. One morning, Simone arrived carrying her worn leather notebook. Mrs. Han noticed it immediately. "You always carry that book." Simone smiled. "I never cook without it." Mrs. Han gently opened it. The pages were faded, stained with flour, and filled with handwritten notes. It looked less like a cookbook, and more like a family treasure. "Your grandmother?" Simone nodded. "Every recipe she ever taught me is in there." Mrs. Han carefully handed it back. "You must protect it." "I do. It's the most valuable thing I own." That afternoon, Chairman Cha entered the kitchen early. He found Simone standing on a stool trying to reach a high cabinet. Without a word, he reached above her and handed down the container. "Thanks," he nodded. Then noticed the notebook. "Your grandmother wrote this?" "Most of it." "You never changed it." "I wasn't allowed." He looked at her. "Allowed?" Simone laughed. She said, "Recipes are like stories. You can improve them, but first you have to understand why they were written." Cha Ji-hwan said nothing, but he remembered every word. That evening, he suddenly stopped eating. The servants froze. He looked at the bowl. "What herb is this?" "Fresh thyme. I've never noticed it before. I only use a little." He tasted another spoonful, then quietly asked, "Would you make this again tomorrow?" The room fell silent. Chairman Cha had never requested the same meal twice. Simone smiled. "If you promise not to complain." A tiny pause. "I make no promises." She laughed. "I expected that." Over the next few days, Ji-hwan spent more time in the kitchen. He claimed he was checking inventory. Nobody believed him. One afternoon, Simone caught him watching a simmering pot. "What are you doing?" "Observing." "You've been observing for 20 minutes." "I'm thorough." She folded her arms. "No, you're curious," he finally admitted. "Perhaps." She smiled. "I knew it." One rainy evening, Ji-hwan remained in the dining room after dinner. Simone noticed. "You look like you're thinking." "I am." "Dangerous." He almost smiled. "You always have something to say." "Only when it's necessary." He looked out at the rain. "My mother used to cook." Simone stayed silent. "It wasn't expensive, but every Sunday, she made one meal. I've spent 15 years trying to taste it again." The mystery finally made sense. "I thought, if I hired the best chefs, someone would recreate it." He lowered his eyes. "They never did." Simone spoke gently. "Because they were trying to copy the recipe." He looked at her. "My grandmother always said, the secret ingredient isn't written on the page. It's the reason you're cooking." "I don't understand." She smiled. "My grandmother never cooked so people would call her talented. She cooked because she loved seeing people leave the table happier than when they sat down." She closed her notebook. "You can't measure that. You can only feel it." After a long silence, Ji-hwan admitted, "I don't remember the recipe. I only remember how my mother made me feel." Simone's eyes softened. "Then maybe you were never searching for the food. You were searching for the memory." Those words stayed with him long after she left. At a charity gala a few days later, several executives teased him. "So, the famous Chairman Cha finally found a chef he couldn't fire." Another laughed. "I hear she's just a kitchen assistant." "Give it another month. She'll be gone like the others." Ji-hwan calmly set down his glass. No. The room fell silent. They're mistaken. About what? She's staying. By the next morning, half of Seoul knew Chairman Cha had publicly defended someone for the first time. Back at the mansion, Simone checked an email during lunch. A culinary investor in America wanted to finance her dream restaurant. Everything she had worked for was finally within reach. She should have been happy. Instead, she stared silently at the screen. Mrs. Han noticed. Good news? Simone forced a smile. The best. Then why don't you look happy? She looked around the lively kitchen. It no longer felt like work. It felt like family, she whispered, because saying yes means I'll have to leave. Just outside the kitchen doorway, Cha Ji-hwan had arrived to ask about dinner. Instead, he heard every word. Without making a sound, he quietly turned away. And for the first time since Simone Ellis entered his life, the thought of eating alone again felt unbearable. The mansion had never been quieter. Nothing looked different. Chairman Cha Ji-hwan still left before sunrise and returned long after dark. The staff still carried out their duties with perfect precision. But ever since Ji-hwan overheard Simone's plans to leave for America, everything between them had changed. Not anger, not resentment, silence. The playful teasing disappeared. Their conversations became polite greetings. Neither of them knew how to talk about tomorrow, because tomorrow meant goodbye. Ji-hwan buried himself in work, endless board meetings, investor conferences, hotel acquisitions, late-night strategy sessions. If he stayed busy enough, he wouldn't have to watch Simone prepare to leave. Mrs. Han noticed immediately. Another untouched dinner returned to the kitchen. She sighed softly. He isn't avoiding the food. One of the younger cooks frowned. Then what's wrong? Mrs. Han smiled sadly. He's avoiding saying goodbye. Simone noticed too. Every evening she prepared dinner. Every evening his chair remained empty. Her dream restaurant in New York was finally within reach. She should have been celebrating. Instead, she found herself listening for footsteps that never came. The night before her flight, Simone stood alone inside the kitchen. She slowly untied her apron. Her fingers brushed across the old wooden spoon Mrs. Han insisted brought good luck. She smiled. I'll miss this place. Her eyes wandered across the spice rack, the chopping board, the little radio they played every afternoon. Even the oversized stockpot Ji-hwan once called intimidating. She laughed quietly, then reached for the light switch. Crash! A loud metallic bang echoed through the kitchen. Another crash followed. Smoke drifted beneath the swinging doors. Simone blinked. What on earth? She hurried toward the sound. The moment the doors swung open, she froze. Flour covered almost every surface. Vegetables rolled across the marble floor. One onion sat inside the sink. A carrot somehow balanced on top of the refrigerator. 2 pots boiled furiously. Another smoked angrily. Standing in the middle of complete disaster, wearing a black apron over his expensive white shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows, hair slightly messy, was Cha Ji-hwan. He looked at her. She looked around the room, then back at him. Should I call the fire department? Or an architect? He sighed. I haven't decided. She tried to stay serious. She really did. Then burst into laughter. I leave for one evening, and you've declared war on the kitchen. I followed your notebook. She glanced at the bubbling pot. Tasted it? No. Good. It can't be that bad. She picked up a spoon. Tasted it. Immediately reached for a glass of water. I'm offended. You should be. She laughed. I've tasted medicine with better seasoning. I followed every instruction. She gently closed the notebook. My grandmother always said recipes aren't meant to be copied. He frowned. What are they for then? She smiled. They're conversations. You listen. You adjust. You trust your instincts. He looked at the pot. The stew speaks? She grinned. Not literally. I was beginning to worry. She rolled up her sleeves. Move over, Chairman. Without arguing, he stepped aside. She handed him another onion. We're starting again. From scratch? Exactly. The next hour felt strangely familiar. No. She gently repositioned his fingers on the knife. You hold it like this. I'd rather keep all 10 fingers. So would I. He chopped. She stared at the oversized onion pieces. You've invented onion bricks. They're symmetrical. They're the size of potatoes. She laughed. You really are impossible. So I've been told. As the stew simmered, the awkwardness slowly disappeared. Conversation returned. So did laughter. She reached for the pepper grinder. At the exact same moment, so did he. Their fingers brushed. Neither moved. Neither seemed to notice the stew anymore. She smiled first. You can let go. I know. You haven't. Right. He quietly withdrew his hand. A few minutes later, he tasted the stew. It needs more pepper. She tasted it. No, it doesn't. He smiled. I've heard that before. You'll keep hearing it. She nudged his shoulder. I was right the first time. I know. She grinned. I'll remember you admitted that. He sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. Their laughter filled the kitchen once again. Then, as Simone reached for the flour, the paper bag slipped from her hands. It exploded in a soft white cloud. For a moment, neither of them could see anything. When the flour settled, Ji-hwan looked down at himself. His black apron had become almost completely white. Simone burst into laughter. Oh no, you look ridiculous. He raised an eyebrow. I'm glad someone is enjoying this. She pointed. There's flour on your nose. He instinctively reached up. No, wait. She stepped closer. Very gently. She brushed the flour away with her fingertips. There? Much better. He noticed a tiny streak of flour on her cheek. Without thinking, his thumb softly brushed it away. She didn't pull back. Neither spoke. Then Simone smiled mischievously. With one finger, she dabbed another streak of flour onto the tip of his nose. There. Perfect. He blinked. You did that on purpose. I absolutely did. A slow smile spread across his face. So, that's how we're playing. Before she could react, he lightly dusted flour across her apron. Her eyes widened. Chairman Cha? She scooped up another handful. You've made a terrible mistake. She ran. Catch me first. He laughed. Gladly. Tiny clouds of flour floated through the warm light as they chased each other around the marble kitchen. The cold billionaire who terrified boardrooms was laughing like a carefree young man, and Simone had never seen him look happier. She glanced over her shoulder. Still laughing. Still running. She never noticed the thin layer of flour covering the polished marble beneath her feet. Simone's foot slipped. Her smile disappeared instantly. Ji-hwan. Before she could fall, he caught her. One strong arm wrapped around her waist. The force of her momentum pulled him off balance. They stumbled backward together. Ji-hwan's back slid gently against the kitchen cabinets before they both landed on the floor. A soft thud echoed through the room. Silence. Complete silence. For several long seconds. Neither of them moved. Simone lay against him. One hand rested over his heart. His arm was still firmly around her waist. Her long black bob twists had fallen softly across one side of her face. Tiny specks of flour floated through the warm kitchen light like snow. The only sound was the quiet bubbling of the stew behind them. Slowly, she lifted her eyes. He was already looking at her. Not at her apron. Not at the flour. At her. Their eyes locked. The laughter from only moments ago slowly faded into something neither of them had expected. Something quieter. Something far more dangerous. Simone became painfully aware of how close they were. She could feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing. She could hear the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. It was surprisingly calm, unlike hers. Her own heart refused to slow down. I should probably get up. Ji-hwan smiled softly. Probably. Neither of them moved. She laughed nervously. You're not making this easy. His smile grew just a little. Neither are you. She finally tried to stand. The moment she shifted her weight, her foot slipped again on the flour. A small gasp escaped her lips. Without thinking, Ji-hwan tightened his arm around her waist to steady her. Instead of creating distance, he accidentally pulled her even closer. Their faces were now only inches apart. Neither of them seemed willing to break the moment. Simone searched his eyes. She'd seen those eyes cold enough to frighten billionaires. She'd seen them soften around Mrs. Han. She'd seen them laugh for the very first time tonight. But this, she had never seen before. He wasn't looking at her with curiosity. He wasn't looking at her with gratitude. He was looking at her with affection. Real. Undeniable. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. What are you thinking? For the first time since they'd met, Cha Ji-hwan answered without hiding behind carefully chosen words. I'm thinking, he smiled sadly, that I'm going to miss you. A tear threatened to escape. She blinked it away. Very gently, she brushed a tiny streak of flour from his hair. There, she whispered. You missed a spot. He chuckled quietly. I wasn't paying attention. I noticed. Their smiles slowly faded again. Neither of them spoke. Words no longer seemed necessary. Ji-hwan slowly lifted one hand. His fingertips brushed a loose twist away from her face. His thumb lingered gently against her cheek. Simone closed her eyes for just a second. Not because she was afraid, because she trusted him. When she opened them again, he was a little closer. Not enough to presume. Just enough to ask the question without speaking. She didn't move away. She didn't step back. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was, looking into his eyes, waiting. His gaze drifted briefly toward her lips, then back to her eyes. She noticed. A tiny smile appeared. So, she whispered, the fearless Chairman Cha is nervous? He laughed softly. You have no idea. I think I do, she smiled. Then, very slowly, she leaned forward too, just enough to meet him halfway. The space between them disappeared. Their foreheads almost touched, their noses nearly brushed. For one perfect heartbeat, nothing else in the world existed. Then, steam burst from the stove. The timer shrieked through the kitchen. Both of them jumped apart. The stew! Simone hurried toward the stove, laughing. Ji-hwan rubbed the back of his neck. Bad timing, she smiled. Very bad timing. Together, they rescued the pot before it spilled completely. For several quiet minutes, they worked side by side, passing ingredients without asking, finishing each other's movements naturally. Finally, the stew was ready. Simone filled 2 bowls. He tasted it, closed his eyes, then smiled. It still isn't as good as yours. She tasted it too. No, it isn't. She smiled warmly. But it's the closest you've ever come. Ji-hwan slowly set the bowl down. For 15 years, I thought I missed my mother's cooking. I was wrong. He looked around the flour-covered kitchen. I didn't miss the recipe. I missed how she made a house feel alive. His eyes found Simone. When my mother was here, this mansion felt like home. When she died, it became nothing more than a building. He smiled gently. Then you walked into my kitchen. You argued with me. You ignored my title. You refused to let me ruin perfectly good food. She laughed through gathering tears. And somewhere between your terrible jokes, your stubborn arguments about seasoning, and tonight, he stepped closer. You stopped being the woman who cooked for me. His voice became almost a whisper. You became the woman I wanted to come home to. A single tear rolled down Simone's cheek. Ji-hwan placed a leather folder on the counter. She opened it. Restaurant blueprints, ownership documents, kitchen designs. At the very top, Ellis Kitchen. Owner, Simone Ellis. She stared at him. What is this? Your dream. I don't understand. Cha Group purchased the property. We renovated it. We equipped the kitchen. It belongs to you. You did all of this. For me? He smiled. This is the first investment I've ever made because I believed in someone's heart. She laughed through happy tears. What do you want in return? One dinner? Only one? Every Friday, she slipped her hand into his. I think I can do that. Months later, Ellis Kitchen became one of Seoul's most celebrated restaurants. Every Friday evening, Chairman Cha's black sedan stopped outside after closing. Simone looked over her shoulder and tossed him an apron. You're late. Only by your standards. She smiled. Smart answer. As they began cooking together, a young apprentice quietly asked Mrs. Han, Is it true Chairman Cha fired 43 chefs? Mrs. Han smiled. He did. Then why did he keep Chef Simone? Mrs. Han watched them laughing over another pot of stew. He was never looking for the perfect chef. He was waiting for the woman who would make this house feel like home again. Outside, the lights of Seoul shimmered across the Han River. Inside, two people who had found each other through recipes, laughter, flower-covered aprons, and quiet acts of love began cooking another meal together, not because they had to, but because they had finally found exactly what they had both been searching for: home.